Welcome to a dialogue on accountability in the digital age. A dialogue with representatives of a global, multi-stakeholder community.
And I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted to have a dialogue with MoribaJah. Moriba, welcome to the program.
Aloha, my brother.
Hey, Moriba, allow me to introduce you to our guests. You are an American space scientist and aerospace engineer, and you describe yourself as a space environmentalist.
Absolutely.
So you're currently a professor at the aerospace engineering in Texas, in Austin, Texas. You're also a co-founder of Privateer Space with Apple co-founders Steve Wozniak and Alex Fielding, where you're the chief scientist. So we'll talk about that. And in the past, you've worked with the Air Force, NASA, Jet Propulsion Lab, working on the Mars program. And your work has resulted in numerous awards and recognition. So very much a person to talk to. And your mission is assessing, quantifying, and predicting the behavior of objects in space, both man-made and natural. Let's first discuss that and then make the link why it's relevant for the Institute for Accountability in the Digital Age.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So can you describe what is your mission and why that mission is relevant for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I come into space environmentalism first as an astrodynamicist, which is the science that studies motion of things in space. You know, I worked, as you said, for NASA, for the Jet Propulsion Lab for quite some time doing Mars missions. But at some point, I left JPL and I moved to Maui to work for the Air Force Research Laboratory. And that's when I became acquainted with our space garbage problem. You know, at the time, in like 2006, the Department of Defense was tracking about 26,000 objects ranging in size from cell phone to the space station, and only 1,200 were working. Everything else was trash. And I just couldn't believe that 96% of all the things that we were tracking in space was garbage, because that would not be something that people would tolerate on land, the ocean, and that sort of thing. And so I think living on Maui, looking at the levels of unsustainability of Western civilization on the islands with landfills and single-use plastics, and also seeing that detriment to the oceans and then now space, those things kind of came together and planted the seed on trying to motivate and incentivize humans to collectively stop behaving in a way that's choosing self-extinction.
Okay. Now, space is huge. When you talk about, not having the real insight, I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about. Is this like a big issue, or in the sense that it's already too crowded up there and things are going to explode, or is there so much room that I'm trying to figure out if can you put it in that context?
Yeah. So since this is being recorded, can I share my screen real quick? Do you think
yeah, sure.
it'll? Okay. So here it is. I just need for you to say, Yep. Okay, good. So here we go. So picture is worth 1,000 words kind of thing. So this right here is something that I developed at the University of Texas at Austin. It's astrograph was what I developed here at UT Austin, but I was able to migrate, transfer that to Privateer, and now it's called Wayfinder. So every single dot, so this is what people are seeing. Every single dot is a human-made object currently orbiting the Earth. And if I add in dead rocket bodies and fragments of stuff, now you can kind of see it's a bit cluttered. The dots don't reflect the size of the object clearly, but the dots do reflect kind of the locations of things. And you can see these things moving. Anything that is this kind of cyan color is something that works, providing a service like, Starlinks, for instance, and that sort of thing. But anything that is not cyan colored like this, these are pieces of junk, debris, and so on. So there's a lot up there that is junk. And of course, as we have explored land, air, and ocean and left pollution behind to the detriment of the environment, this is a clear sign that we're doing the same thing with space. And back to your idea of accountability, I am trying to make space more transparent, more predictable, and develop a body of evidence by which to hold people accountable for their behaviors in this environment. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you mentioned the ocean, because you see people making a comparison between the law of the high seas, how we manage accountability, which is actually written by a Dutch guy 500 years ago. We're looking at similarities in the internet. Now you're saying, look, I'm looking at the similarities in space as well.
Yeah.
So how's the governance organized at the moment?
I mean, truthfully, so we have the United Nations. There's an Office of Outer Space Affairs. There's something called the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. They have met for some number of years and developed some guidelines for long-term sustainability. But in terms of governance, there is like the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, which provides allocates radio frequency spectrum to anybody that's operating in space. But really, it's up to every country to police its own citizens, its own companies in space. And part of the problem is that there is no global governance for it. Basically, every country determines when it wants to launch things, how, and so on and so forth, without any sort of coordination planning with anybody else. And that's part of the issue.
Okay, now what you're and this is the same parallel applies for the digital space as well. Now I was wondering, are you familiar with the Astra Carta, which the King of Great Britain launched in 2022?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. And for the audience, it's bringing together public and private sector on space sustainability. So yeah, I very much would assume it's something you are aware of. Would something like that work? Is it working?
Well, so I think the Astra Carta is mostly ideas about and a call to say these are things that we should be thinking about, but in and of itself, it's not really a mechanism that'll make anything happen. It's back to individual governments to regulate the people and companies that they license to operate in space. That's where the pressure needs to be placed. And in terms of international law, liability for damage to things because of space objects falls on the shoulders of what are defined as launching states. And, the Convention on Liability and Damage defines a launching state as a state that launches an object in orbit, a state that procures the launch of an object in orbit, and a state from whose territory or facility an object is launched. And so, for example, if a company like Planet Labs, if they have a satellite that they launch with India's PSLV, that means that the United States and India are jointly liable for that object for its lifetime if it causes any damage. The problem is that damage is really relegated to something physical that happens, not necessarily economical, not necessarily operational. Which I think needs to be changed. To me, that's a gap. And the other thing too is that, harmful interference is also not really defined. And I think, that's also a salient issue, a gap when it comes to, international space law.
Okay. Okay, now I'm just trying to figure out if it's something the digital industry, the digital world could copy, but it also seems like there might be things we'd be doing which you could copy.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I mean, for me, back to transparency, predictability, and accountability. I think that's what space domain awareness needs to provide. People say, well, we need to enforce laws, and I tell people you can't enforce what you don't manage.
Yeah.
You can't manage what you don't know, and you can't know what you don't measure. So it all comes down to measurements, which is why I'm a big measurements kind of guy. And
the map you just shared with us, which describes, hey, what's the real issue?
Yeah. So Wayfinder, right, is showing you it gives you an idea of where things are located and maybe who's operating them and these sorts of things. Now, it's not it's not the final database for these things, because when I told you about launching states, it turns out that there's no place to know which launching states are associated to any given object. That's not, that you can't find that in any database. And the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs has a registry of space objects, but the treaty or the convention that kind of governs that doesn't require that all launching states be disclosed in the registration process. Even with the ITU, when people file for, have ITU filings and they say, okay, I'm going to be located in this spot and transmitting on these frequencies, there is no follow-up to measure to see whether or not those objects are actually, abiding by that. Are they complying? Are they complying physically with being there? Are they complying with transmitting only in those frequencies? So it's almost like, okay, here's this laundry list of things that we think would be good for you to do. We hope that you do them, and nobody's going to check afterwards whether or not they've been done. And so I think that's where I come into play with my work, is I'm trying to build a computational infrastructure that takes in heterogeneous data from multiple sources, aggregates them, and evaluates, does a monitor to see who's compliant and who isn't.
Okay, now, the fact that you have provide that insight, who would be interested? Who do you want to be, who do you think should be interested in this?
Compliance assessment monitoring system?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for sure, governments should be interested.
Yeah.
Because I feel that this is something that helps governments do their job. And it'll certainly expose behaviors of who's following things and who isn't. So it's back to, if you want to be able to manage the thing, you got to know what's going on. So it's knowing what the behaviors are. But also, if I'm a commercial operator, if I'm a space insurance company, I think that it's valuable to know who's behaving and how, right?
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and given the fact that more and more private industry is coming into space, I can imagine that, we need to.
And if I'm an investor,
Yeah.
It'd be good to know what's the risk of my investment. Am I investing in something where it's completely unmonitored and, something happens and then basically the capability that I invested in is gone, and so what, what happens, and, all these sorts of things, for sure.
Okay. Now, I want to touch upon something else to see if there's a parallel or not, and then we're actually going to connect the two. One of the issues with accountability in a digital age is the very fast development of digital technology and the fact that the legal and regulatory framework is lagging, just cannot keep up with. So we have to rethink how we're going to provide a framework. Do you have the same issue in space, or is it not that?
Yeah. No, yeah. So I mean, basically, we're launching 60 plus satellites every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The technology in the satellites, as you said, are outpacing regulatory frameworks and that sort of stuff. Yeah, it is a problem in space. And the thing is, it makes regulatory frameworks have to be completely reactive. We don't know what the unintended consequences are of the technology. And because of that, I think that that's extremely risky.
Yeah.
Because we're not letting the environment give us feedback of those unintended consequences of our behaviors and actions. So yeah, it's bad news. I think governments, instead of just saying, oh, we're just going to say yes, 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 and then we'll figure it out later. I think that's a risky proposition. I think it's good to have some intentional pauses and say, let's think about this a little bit more carefully so that we don't end up doing something that then prevents us from using space, because that's where we're headed.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but I've heard the same call earlier this year for the IT industry and with the development of AI, and then you see a lot of people talk about this is actually a marketing gimmick. One side wants to catch up with the other. So hey, hold on, I'm falling behind. I want to catch up with you. So it's not as philanthropic as people assumed it was.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a
Term
little,
idea.
yes, there's a little bit of everything. There's a little bit of that. I'm sure that some people want things to slow down so that they can catch up. But you know, genuinely, I look at things like traditional ecological knowledge, knowledge of indigenous people, and how they achieve sustainability. And when they make decisions, they try to make decisions for 10 generations from now. They try to make decisions looking at how how their actions might influence their own lack of sustainability if they're not careful. Doing this more than they should, doing that, overfishing, over this, over that. To me, maybe humanity is suffering in the overlaunching. Instead of like overfishing and overcutting, maybe we're overlaunching. Maybe this whole thing of just, you know, sending 100 satellites every 3 weeks is basically populating space at a rate where we make space unusable at this rate, and then it's going to be like, oh, well, now it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, and reality is they're not separate worlds anymore, what you're talking about and the internet, because I'm just taking one example, which is getting up to space. The whole Starlink program meant to increase the internet capacity. Are you a favor of such solutions? I mean, a commercial entity, just look, let's fill the space with stuff, provide people an offer.
Yeah, so here's the one thing that I can say, because as with many things, you know, things aren't binary. It's not it's not strictly a 1 or a 0. It's not a Bernoulli random variable, to be nerdy. So the thing is, it's like on the one hand, I see that knowledge is asymmetric across humanity.
Yeah.
Data and information is not equally accessible by people across the globe. And there is a detriment to that. And it means that the people that have can hold power and influence over the people that don't have, in great part because of this asymmetry in data, information, and knowledge. So anything that makes the data, information, and knowledge more equally accessible to humanity is something that I'm all for, which is one of the purposes that Privateer exists, and even this company, MoribaJah Universal, MJU, exists. So in that respect, I like the idea of a global internet. Because most people on the planet don't have internet.
Yeah. So
now,
sorry. No, I'm just wondering if that you're alluding to a trade-off. I mean, global access to the internet versus putting more satellites up there, which eventually turns junk.
Well, right. And so the thing is, it's like, so on the other hand, I see a growing space traffic problem.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, we may be launching too many things too quickly.
Okay.
Just because it's legal. And so from the environmentalist in me, I say we should slow down on that so that we can understand the feedback from the environment on, are we doing the right thing? And is this something that is sustainable? You know, are we going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we just, you know, launch 10,000 objects into this orbit? So the environmentalist in me says we need to slow down. And the altruist in me says we need global internet as one of the mechanisms. But yes, there has to be, there can be a little tug of war between these things. But I believe that with the right dialogues and being inclusive, we can achieve some sort of optimal spot in being able to do those things.
Yeah. Now, the way you describe it, I mean, and the thing about it, it's simple. I really assume devil's going to be in the details. But okay, so could that mean, okay, you can only put up a satellite if you have a refund? So you have to bring it back if it's fulfilled its purpose.
Yeah. So to me, this is where I am trying to, you know, plead with the governments of the world to usher in a circular space economy that focuses first and foremost on the prevention of pollution by incentivizing companies to develop and operate reusable and recyclable satellites and rockets.
Okay.
You know, Elon has shown that reusable rockets is possible, but we don't have reusable and recyclable satellites. Right now, satellites are like single-use plastics. Satellites are single-use satellites. And so as soon as you're done with the plastic, right, for single use, it's trash. Same thing is on orbit. As soon as the satellite dies, it's garbage. And so the thing is, the rate of the cleansing of the garbage is much lower than the rate at which things are populating, you know, the orbits, which is a problem. And so, yeah, I think that government should say, hey, we are going to favor launching reusable and recyclable satellites. So no more single-use satellites where possible. And for the things that have to be single-use, then there needs to be responsible disposal. And that maybe is a third-party organization that then becomes like the garbage cleaners that can go and remove things, and they can get paid a fee. They can get paid a fee to remove the trash in certain orbits when the satellite has to be single use. So yeah, that's what I think should happen.
Okay. Hey, we keep on talking. Time is moving very quickly. I just want to finish with a couple of questions I have for you, Moriba. First of all, is there any low-hanging fruit? Like, this is something we could and should do today?
Yeah, so I think the thing that we should and could do today is, you know, so right now, for instance, with Privateer, we're going to launch this thing called Pono with deorbit in November, and it's a package that's going to ride on board that satellite to make the satellite multi-use, which means just like with Uber, you know, we can do rideshare. Several of us can take public transportation, the same bus. This package makes satellites something that multiple people can subscribe to get data without having to launch their own. Right now, whenever somebody wants data from space, you know, by and large, they're like, well, I can either buy an image which is really, really, really expensive, or if I know I want lots of images, because it's so expensive, I'm just gonna launch my own satellite constellation and then I control it, right? The thing is, we don't want to incentivize more people launching satellites if they don't have to. We'd like to make satellites multi-purpose. So that's something that we can do right now, and we're doing right now with Privateer with Pono. So I think things like that make a lot of sense. We could develop, you know, sustainability metrics, you know, for space, like a carbon footprint analog, call it a space traffic footprint, that quantifies the burden that any given object poses on anything else. That way we can actually put a bounty on objects and say, hey, whoever removes this object, we're gonna pay them like salvage laws. We're gonna pay a salvage company to remove this object because it has the largest space traffic footprint or something like that. Those are things that could happen right now.
Okay. Brings another thought in me. What would your I mean, we spoke at AI for Good, so that's the connection. Is there any advice you would give the global digital community? What are the quick wins? What are your suggestions that we can manage our accountability?
Yeah,
what you can give us?
Well, so the thing that I would say is that I feel that the problems that the digital community are looking at, I don't feel that they're respected, meaning there's just phenomena happening all over the place, whether it's space, the land, air, you know, whatever, economical markets, whatever. And I feel that people don't respect the problem in the sense that the data sets that are collected to be analyzed are limited. They're far from being complete. And I think that our own arrogance gets in the way to say, oh yeah, well, I'm going to do this analysis and these are the data that I'm going to use, and I don't care about anything else, because I'm going to consider everything else irrelevant. I think that respecting the problem means that we look at bringing in data and information sources that on the surface might seem irrelevant, but really there could be mutual information content in these aggregated data sets that gives us even better insights.
Yeah.
And I also think that the digital community should respect uncertainty, and I don't see enough talk about that. because we're very ignorant of things.
Okay.
And I
Can
don't
you,
think,
do you have time to explain what do you mean by uncertainty in this case?
yeah. So look, in uncertainty quantification, there tends to be two types of uncertainty: aleatory uncertainty, which is due to randomness, and epistemic uncertainty, which is due to systematic effects or ignorance. And I believe that most of the uncertainty that exists with anything is really epistemic. It's really due to our ignorance, not due to randomness. In fact, I don't really believe that randomness exists. I feel, because as soon as you say that's random, you've given up on learning. Because the thing is, you can't know something better than its inherent randomness by definition. As soon as you say it's random, you're done. There's nothing else to learn about the thing. And I'm a perpetual learner. So yeah, you know, usually what people do, here's the perfect example. Okay, and I gave this because I teach probability and statistics to undergrads here at UT Austin. And I said, here we go. So you and I, let's say we're talking with each other, we're in the same room, there's a window next to us, but you and I were talking to each other. We hear tires screeching and some shouting, and the next thing that you and I do is we go and we both look out the window and we see a car that is stopped. We see a driver that is saying lots of things to a biker on the ground. Somebody was riding a bicycle, they're on the ground, the bicycle's on the ground. And so I asked my students, I said, what happened? So I ask you, what happened?
I'm assuming, based on my knowledge and history, that an accident happened.
Okay, well, so what do you think happened?
I don't know, because I don't have enough information to know whose fault it was, what happened. It's just,
Okay,
I know I see the end result, probably because it's a biker, he's on the ground, but I don't know whose fault it was.
so but what? Okay, so you don't know whose fault, but are you saying that the biker got hit?
I don't know, because looking out the window, I can assess that.
Right. So here's the thing. So you passed this with flying colors, my friend. You're the only one, because all of my students said basically the car hit the bike and the biker fell off. And I said, okay, is there any other hypothesis that explains the evidence? Because I was trying to make the difference between deductive reasoning and abductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning says, given this, the next thing is logical. It follows.
Yeah.
Given this, it follows that this is basically, you know, the cause of this sort of thing. And it's without ambiguity. And I said, all of you guys use deduction, but you used it when you shouldn't have. Basically, there was uncertainty about what happened, and you brought in your own prejudice to get rid of the uncertainty because the uncertainty was uncomfortable. You made assumptions beyond what the information and the evidence gave you. You made the assumption that the guy in the car hit the biker. But another thing that could explain the evidence is the biker just went out. Something happened to the biker fell on the ground on his own, and the car stopped to just see if the biker was okay or whatever. Like, that's something else that explains the same evidence, the tire screeching and all this other stuff. And so what I try to tell to the digital people is, it might be computationally expensive to maintain these alternative hypotheses, but it's the right thing to do. Because if you just bring your prejudice to bear, you may be right, but you may be completely wrong. And you're giving your customers the wrong sorts of insights because you're bringing your own prejudice to bear on the situation. So when you have an incomplete data set, and a complete data set, I'm defining as one that allows you to make deduction. To me, a data set is complete when there is one and only one possible explanation to the evidence, and it's just logical. But if you don't have a data set that lets you deduce, then you have to maintain these alternative hypotheses that are possible to respect the problem and respect the fact that you're ignorant, and you shouldn't just be jumping to conclusions because they could be very erroneous.
Hey, I like that insight, to bring that to the table. We indeed are prejudiced. We assume too much. We know it's biased if you look at AI engines, but if we want to be held accountable, it's the uncertainty we also need to think about. So that's
right.
Hey, finally, Moriba, given the fact that the Institute for Accountability has a global reach, is there anything you'd like to ask or suggest to our audience how also we could help you and bring this together?
Look, you know, the work that I'm doing with my companies and also mainly at the University of Texas with the research that I'm doing in compliance assessment and monitoring. I have the people to do the work, but I just don't have the resources. I'm always looking for, you know, funding, people that want to collaborate, people that want to give us use cases and data. So yeah, I'm here for everybody's, you know, at your disposal, and I have some great ideas on how to make this all come together. But yeah, I'm definitely in need of resources. So
Okay, well, people out there, if based on this you feel you think you have resources, reach out and we'll make certain we make those connections. So Moriba, again, I want to thank you for spending your time with the Institute for Accountability. I'm also very happy that I passed your class, if I understand you correctly. No, enjoy talking and exploring the parallels between space and the internet, but also see that they are truly linked, and we need to see how we're going to help each other solve this. Thank you.
absolutely, my brother. Well, thank you for sure.